The old photograph shook in my hands, not because it was fragile, not because it had faded after 35 years. It shook because every time I looked into that little boy's bright blue eyes, my body remembered the worst day of my life before my mind did. Then a stranger sat across from me. He didn't ask if the seat was taken. He didn't order coffee. He looked directly at the photograph, then at me. And with one quiet sentence, he destroyed everything I thought I knew. "You're still searching for your son, aren't you?" My heart stopped. If you've ever imagined what you'd do if someone stole everything you loved, if you've ever wished karma would finally catch the people who deserve it, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me until the end, because today's story proves one terrifying truth. Sometimes justice waits decades before knocking on your door. Every Thursday morning, for the last 35 years, I had followed the exact same routine. Same coffee shop, same corner table, same untouched cup of black coffee, same worn photograph. People thought I came there because I liked the quiet. The truth was uglier. This calf sat only 3 blocks away from the daycare where my 6-year-old son disappeared on April 15, 1989. Part of me believed that if I stayed close enough, some miracle would finally find me. My name is Daniel Carter. Once, I had been a husband, a father, a man who laughed easily. Now I was simply a survivor carrying grief like an extra heartbeat. The photograph showed my son, Ethan Carter. Golden hair. A dinosaur t-shirt he refused to take off. A smile so innocent it almost hurt to remember. Every wrinkle on that picture had been made by my fingers. Every faded corner carried 35 years of impossible hope. Most people learn to move on. I never did. The stranger sitting across from me looked to be in his late 40s. Dark hair streaked with silver, sharp eyes that never wandered. His face carried the calm confidence of someone who already knew exactly how this conversation would end. Without saying another word, he placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. It landed with a dull thud. The sound echoed louder than the chatter filling the calf. I stared at it. "So," I whispered, my throat dry. "Who are you?" He folded his hands together. "My name is Adrian Brooks." His voice never trembled. "But my name isn't why I'm here." He slowly pushed the folder toward me. "Everything that happened to your son," he paused, "is inside." The room suddenly felt too small. My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked from the folder, back to the stranger. What kind of sick joke is this? He met my eyes without blinking. "It's not a joke." Then he leaned forward, and quietly spoke the sentence that shattered 35 years of certainty. "Because the little boy you buried in your memories never actually disappeared." For several long seconds, I couldn't breathe. The stranger's words echoed through my mind like a gunshot. Your little boy never actually disappeared. I stared at him, searching his face for even the slightest hint of amusement. Nothing. No smile. No nervous twitch. No sign he was lying. Only absolute certainty. My fingers slowly reached toward the manila folder lying between us. But before I could touch it, Adrian placed his hand gently on top of it. "Once you open this," he said quietly, "your life will never belong to the past again." I swallowed hard. My life ended 35 years ago. His eyes softened. "No, Daniel. It was stolen." The words cut deeper than I expected. For decades I had blamed fate, the police, the daycare, even myself. But stolen, that word carried a different kind of weight. A weight that demanded someone be held accountable. Finally, Adrian lifted his hand. "Open it." My fingers trembled so violently I almost dropped the folder. Inside lay dozens of photographs. Police reports. Hospital records. Old newspaper clippings. Birth certificates. Documents so carefully preserved they looked as though someone had guarded them with their life. The very first photograph stopped my heart. 2 little boys, around 6 years old. One wore a bright yellow dinosaur shirt. My son, Ethan. I'd recognize that smile anywhere. Beside him stood another child. Dark hair. Serious eyes. A frightened expression frozen forever inside an old photograph. Adrian pointed toward the second boy. "That's me." I looked back at him in disbelief. "You knew Ethan?" He nodded slowly. "We were together the day everything happened." The calf around us disappeared. The voices, the music, the smell of fresh coffee. Everything faded until only his voice remained. I've replayed that morning every day for 35 years, Adrian whispered. I remember Ethan crying because he'd forgotten his favorite dinosaur book at home. A painful smile crossed my lips. That sounds like him. He thought one missed show and tell would ruin his entire life. Adrian gave a faint smile. Back then, problems were simple. Then his expression darkened. Until the bathroom door opened, I felt ice crawl up my spine. There was a maintenance worker. Gray uniform. Toolbox. No one looked twice. He smiled at us. He said one of our mothers was waiting outside. I clenched my fists. What was his name? Adrian looked down at the documents. Victor Hale. The name meant nothing. Yet somehow, I hated him instantly. He grabbed Ethan first. Adrian's breathing became uneven. I tried to stop him. I kicked. I screamed. But I was 6. His voice cracked. He took both of us. Silence settled over the table. 35 years, the police had always insisted only one child had been kidnapped. They were wrong. Horribly wrong. I looked up. If you escaped, how are you sitting here? Adrian's eyes filled with something far worse than sadness. Guilt. He slowly pulled another photograph from the folder. A wrecked blue van, twisted metal, police tape, flashing lights. The kidnapper died that same day. I frowned. Then why wasn't Ethan brought home? Adrian closed his eyes. Because someone inside that hospital made one mistake, and that mistake stole your son for the next 35 years. He slid one final document across the table. I looked down. Then every drop of blood drained from my face. The name printed on the hospital intake form wasn't Ethan Carter. It was someone else's. And that single clerical error changed every life connected to it forever. The hospital admission form slipped from my trembling fingers and landed on the table. I couldn't stop staring at it. One line. One name. One mistake. A mistake that had stolen 35 years of my life. I looked up at Adrian. No, my voice barely existed. This can't be real. I wish it wasn't, he replied quietly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Outside the cafe window, people hurried through their ordinary Thursday morning. Parents laughed with children. Businessmen checked their watches. Cars rolled past without slowing down. The world kept moving, completely unaware that mine had just stopped. Finally, I forced myself to ask the question that terrified me most. What happened after the crash? Adrian leaned back and took a slow breath. The kidnapper never survived the accident. The police found 2 injured boys inside the van. They rushed both of us to St. Matthew's Medical Center. He paused. The emergency room was overwhelmed. There had been a massive highway collision that same morning. Doctors were treating dozens of trauma patients. Everything was chaos. I listened without blinking. My jacket had been ripped apart during the crash, Adrian continued. My name tag was gone. I was terrified. So when a social worker asked my name, his eyes filled with shame. I didn't tell her. You were 6, I whispered. You were scared. I said your son's name instead. The words struck like a hammer. I said, my name is Ethan Carter. My chest tightened so violently it felt impossible to inhale. But why? Adrian looked away. Because I knew my own father was a monster. He'd spent half his life in prison. I believed that if anyone found out who I really was, they'd send me back to him. So I grabbed the only safe name my frightened little mind could remember. Ethan. He covered his face with both hands. I thought I was saving myself. I never imagined I was destroying someone else's family. The guilt in his voice wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't defensive. It was the kind of guilt that ages a man decades before his time. I wanted to hate him. God knows I tried. But every time I looked at him, I stopped seeing the man. I saw a terrified 6-year-old boy covered in blood, believing one wrong answer meant going back to hell. The real villain wasn't sitting across from me. The real villain had been buried years ago. Victor Hale, the man who kidnapped 2 innocent children, the man whose selfish cruelty had created a nightmare no one ever corrected. So, I asked slowly, if the hospital believed you were Ethan, what happened to my son? Adrian reached into the folder one final time. His hand hesitated. This, he said softly, is where everything becomes even harder. He handed me a recent photograph, a construction site, a tall man wearing a hard hat, broad shoulders, confident posture, dark blonde hair, strong jawline. But it wasn't those features that froze me. It was his eyes. Bright blue. Exactly like my wife's. Exactly like the little boy in the faded photograph I had carried for 35 years. Adrian's voice was almost a whisper. His name is Ryan Hale. At least, that's what he believes. I couldn't take my eyes off the picture. My heart knew the truth before my mind could accept it. My son was alive, living less than 20 miles away, completely unaware that another family had spent 35 years mourning him. And in that moment, hope wasn't the strongest emotion inside me. It was rage. Because someone had stolen my son's identity, my family, my future. And I silently vowed that whoever had profited from that lie would lose everything. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? For 35 years I had prayed for one impossible miracle. Now it was sitting inside a photograph, alive, breathing, smiling, living a life that should have been mine to witness. The next morning, before sunrise, I parked across the street from the construction site Adrian had marked on the map. 6:42 a.m. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every passing truck made my heart race. Every worker who stepped through the gate made me wonder, is that him? At exactly 7:01, a dark blue pickup rolled into the parking lot. The driver climbed out. Tall, confident, broad-shouldered. He stretched his back, grabbed a hard hat from the passenger seat, and greeted everyone with an easy smile. The workers respected him. Some called him boss. Others slapped him on the shoulder as they laughed. He laughed back. It was warm, natural, the laugh of a man who had never questioned who he was. But then he turned toward the morning sun, and I saw them. Those eyes. Hazel's eyes. The same impossible shade of blue. The same thoughtful expression. The same tiny wrinkle between his eyebrows whenever he concentrated. I forgot how to breathe. Every instinct inside me screamed the same truth. That's Ethan. Not the little boy frozen inside my old photograph, but the man he had become. I watched him for hours. He checked blueprints, solved problems, encouraged younger workers, helped an older carpenter lift heavy lumber without being asked. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't cruel. He was respected because he earned it. The realization hurt more than I expected. If he had grown into a selfish man, maybe hatred would have been easier. Instead, he had become the kind of man every father dreams his son will become. Only I hadn't been there to raise him. Someone else had. Around noon, Adrian quietly slipped into the passenger seat of my car. You found him. I didn't need you to tell me. He nodded. I knew you wouldn't. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally I asked, does he know? Adrian slowly shook his head. Nothing. He believes his parents died in a car accident. He believes the Hale family raised him. He believes every memory from his childhood is real. I looked back toward the construction site. Ethan Ryan was helping a young apprentice measure a steel beam. He smiled patiently as he explained something. The apprentice laughed. Ryan laughed too. My chest burned. He looks happy. Adrian's voice became heavy. He is. The word felt like betrayal. Happy, while Hazel cried herself to sleep for decades, while our marriage collapsed under grief, while I sat alone every Thursday morning, staring at a photograph. He had birthdays, graduations, friends, first love, Christmas mornings. Everything we had lost, he had lived. Without us. I should tell him, I whispered. Adrian immediately turned toward me. No, I frowned. What? Not yet. He deserves the truth. Yes, Adrian answered. But not from a man ruled by 35 years of grief. I stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying that right now, you're not looking at your son. You're looking at 35 stolen years. His words hit harder than he knew. Because deep inside, he was right. This wasn't just about finding Ethan anymore. It was about making someone pay. And for the first time in 35 years, revenge felt closer than forgiveness. For 3 days I became a ghost. Not the kind that haunted old houses. The kind that followed a man without ever letting him know. Every morning I parked across from the construction site before sunrise. Every afternoon I watched Ryan Hale leave work in the same blue pickup. Every evening I sat outside his modest home until the lights went out. I memorized his routine the same way I'd memorized every detail of Ethan's disappearance 35 years earlier. He stopped every Tuesday at the same sandwich shop. He always tipped the cashier. He never drove above the speed limit. Every Sunday, he visited an elderly couple who smiled the moment they saw him. They weren't wealthy, their porch sagged, their garden needed work, but Ryan repaired broken fences, trimmed hedges, and carried groceries inside without being asked. They're his adoptive parents, Adrian explained one afternoon. They're good people. I watched Ryan hug the elderly woman before leaving. The embrace lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like someone had driven a knife into my chest. That should have been me. I should have been the father waiting at the front door. I should have watched him grow into this man. Instead, I was a stranger hiding behind a windshield. Every happy memory he carried belonged to someone else. That night I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by 35 years of missing person posters, police reports, and faded photographs. The walls weren't covered with pictures. They were covered with failures. Every unanswered question, every dead end, every promise the police never kept. Then my phone rang. Hazel, the first call in almost 2 weeks. I heard you've been looking into the old case, she said quietly. Who told you? It doesn't matter. Her voice carried the same exhaustion I'd heard for decades. Daniel, please don't let grief make another decision for you. You don't understand. I understand better than anyone. No, I snapped. You learned to live. I didn't. Silence, then she whispered something that I wasn't prepared to hear. If Ethan is alive, don't punish him for surviving. The call ended. I stared at the dark screen for several minutes. Her words echoed in my mind. Don't punish him for surviving. But every time I closed my eyes, I remembered empty birthdays. Christmas mornings without laughter. The tiny bedroom we'd never changed. The marriage that slowly died because grief had become our only language. Someone had to answer for those years. Someone had to feel the same helplessness I'd carried. The next afternoon I followed Ryan after work. Instead of going home, he parked outside a small downtown cafe. A young woman stepped outside to meet him. She smiled the instant she saw him. He smiled back. She kissed him. Long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his future. I watched them laugh over coffee. Planning tomorrow. Planning forever. Something inside me hardened. If life had taught me one lesson, it was this. The fastest way to destroy a man isn't to hurt him. It's to take away the person he believes he'll spend the rest of his life with. I looked at the cafe window one last time, then reached for the folder Adrian had given me. Inside were photographs, medical records, hospital files, and the truth that could destroy Ryan's entire world. For the first time in 35 years, I wasn't searching for justice anymore. I was planning revenge. For 3 days, I carried the folder everywhere. I never opened it in public. I never looked at it for long. Because every page inside it felt like a loaded weapon. One pull of the trigger, and Ryan Hale's entire life would explode. Adrian had warned me. Hazel had begged me. Even the voice inside my own head whispered that I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. But grief has a dangerous way of convincing you that revenge and justice are the same thing. They aren't. I just didn't know it yet. The following Friday, I parked across from the accounting firm where Ryan's girlfriend worked. Her name was Emily Dawson. She walked out just after noon, carrying a leather briefcase and talking on her phone. When she hung up, I stepped into her path. Emily? She frowned. I'm sorry, do I know you? My name is Daniel Carter, I need 10 minutes. It's about Ryan. The smile disappeared from her face. What about him? It's something he doesn't know. Curiosity defeated caution. 5 minutes later, we sat in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe. She watched me carefully while I placed the folder on the table. I know this sounds impossible, I said, but before you decide I'm crazy, look at the first photograph. She hesitated, then opened it. The color drained from her face. A little boy, a dinosaur shirt, a newspaper clipping, a missing child headline, another page, hospital records, police files, Dina reports. She looked at me. I don't understand. The man you love isn't the man he believes he is. Her eyebrows pulled together. What are you talking about? He was kidnapped as a child. He was given another identity. Everything he remembers about his early life was built on a mistake. Emily stared at the papers in complete silence. Then she whispered, Does Ryan know any of this? I shook my head. No. She closed the folder slowly. You came here to tell me before telling him? Yes, why? That single question caught me off guard. Why? Because I wanted revenge? Because I wanted him to lose something? Because happiness felt unfair after everything I'd lost? I could have lied. Instead, I answered honestly. Because I wanted someone else to see him differently before he ever saw himself differently. Emily looked at me for a long moment. There was no anger in her eyes, only sadness. You're not trying to help him. She stood, pushing the folder back toward me. You're trying to make him suffer. Her words landed harder than any punch. Before I could answer, she walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd. That evening, Ryan never came home at his usual time. The porch lights stayed off. The house remained dark. The next morning, Adrian called me. His voice was tight with frustration. You told Emily. How do you know? Because Ryan didn't show up for work. I stayed silent. Adrian exhaled heavily. You think you've won, but you haven't. You've done exactly what Victor Hale did 35 years ago. The words hit like ice water. What are you talking about? He stole Ryan's childhood. You've stolen his future. And neither of you ever asked what he wanted. The call ended. For the first time since this nightmare began, I looked at the folder in my hands, and instead of seeing justice, I saw another broken life. But it was already too late, because Ryan had learned the truth, and he was coming to find the man who had destroyed everything he believed about himself. 3 days later, there was a knock at my apartment door. Not loud, not angry, just 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, Ryan Hale stood in the hallway. His face looked older than it had only a week earlier. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. His shoulders sagged. The confidence I'd admired on the construction site had disappeared. He wasn't angry anymore. He was broken. Without saying a word, he stepped inside. He looked around my apartment. The walls were covered with faded missing person posters, boxes filled with police reports, newspaper clippings. A tiny yellow dinosaur toy sat on a shelf, untouched for 35 years. Ryan picked it up carefully. So, he whispered, you never stopped looking. I couldn't answer. My throat refused to work. He turned toward me. I know everything now. The DNA test, the hospital records, the kidnapping. My real name, Ethan Carter. Hearing those words spoken aloud shattered something inside me. For 35 years I had dreamed of hearing my son say his own name. But this wasn't the moment I'd imagined. There were no tears of joy, no embrace, only silence. I lost Emily, he said quietly. My parents, the people who raised me, they're terrified I'll leave them. My whole life feels fake. His voice cracked. But none of that hurts as much as knowing my own father wanted me to suffer before he wanted me back. Every word landed like a knife. I looked down at my trembling hands. I thought if you felt even a fraction of what I felt, it would somehow make everything fair. Ryan slowly shook his head. It didn't. It just created another victim. The room fell silent. For the first time in 35 years, I stopped blaming the world. I stopped blaming fate. I stopped searching for someone else to punish. The only man standing in front of me wasn't the boy who had been stolen. He was the man I had almost lost twice. Tears blurred my vision. I'm sorry. The words felt impossibly small. I can't give you back your childhood. Ryan replied softly. And you can't give me back mine. Another long silence. Then he stepped closer. I don't know how to call you Dad. I don't even know if I ever will. But I'd like the chance to know Daniel Carter. Not the grieving ghost. Not the angry man. Just my father. I broke. 35 years of grief, guilt, rage, and regret collapsed in a single moment. I hugged my son for the first time since he was 6 years old. Neither of us spoke. We simply stood there, 2 strangers connected by blood, trying to build a future from the ruins of the past. Some wounds never completely heal, some years can never be returned. But revenge had taught me the hardest lesson of my life. Justice doesn't come from making someone else hurt. It comes from refusing to let pain decide who you become. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable revenge and redemption stories. And tell me in the comments, if you were in Daniel's place, would you have chosen revenge or forgiveness? Until next time, remember, karma never forgets an address, it simply waits for the perfect time to knock.